Back to In Depth with Academia. I'm Richard Price, CEO of Academia EDU, and wow, do we have a fascinating topic today. We're diving into a paper by Jacob, Cleophas, DEFO and NZIKOU titled Hermeneutic Reflexivity of Creativity in Translation. That's a bit of a mouthful, right? But trust me, it's a conversation you'll want to join, whether you're a translator, language lover, or just someone who's puzzled about why translations never seem quite the same as the originals. Let me kick off, as always, by saying my job here isn't to champion or criticize any particular paper or idea. What you're about to hear is a neutral walkthrough, a set of insights and provocations for you to consider, not gospel truth, okay? Academia thrives on debate, after all. So what's at the heart of DEFO and NZIKOU's paper? There's this age-old problem in translation. Is fidelity, the act of staying loyal to the original text, more important? Or does a translator's creativity matter even more? And why does this question get so many people, especially scholars, so animated? Are translators traitors, heroes, some weird mix of both? And do we even need to choose? The significance is pretty immediate for anyone who's worked across languages, or even just tried to explain the joke from one language in another. Oh boy, have I tried that at some parties, right? So we all know translating isn't just swapping out words. There's an interpretive act, a kind of negotiation happening behind the scenes. The stakes are high, the meaning, the emotion, the flavor, all ride on this balance between faithfulness and invention. That's the dilemma that DEFO and NZIKOU zooms in on. According to the paper, much of translation theory swings between two poles. Let's call them the faithfulness crowd and the creativity camp. Fidelity, the paper says, has often been hailed as the absolute goal. Be as true as possible to the original, don't add, don't subtract, right? But in reality, well, languages just don't map onto each other that perfectly. Mesita de luz in Spanish isn't exactly nightstand in English, and how are you in English is not quite comment ça va in French. There's always this wiggle room, this need for what? Interpretation, and that's where creativity sneaks in. DEFO and NZIKOU uses a hermeneutic perspective, a fancy way of saying interpretive lens, to argue that creativity in translation isn't just an alternative to fidelity. It's actually a necessity. Translation, he claims, is fundamentally interpretive. The translator can't be just a scribe copying words robotically. Instead, the translator is making choices, sometimes big ones, about meaning, nuance, even rhythm, and sometimes, honestly, this feels less like translating and more like recreating. Now here's the meat of his insight, if you'll pardon the expression. He says that a truly equivalent translation, one that preserves the sense and the value of the original, requires this creative act. It can't be achieved just by sticking slavishly to the original wording. That's kind of freeing to think about, but also kind of intimidating. How much responsibility does that put on a translator? And at what point do you stop being a translator and start being, what, a co-author? Of course, DEFO and NZIKOU acknowledges the potential problem here. If creativity goes unchecked, you might end up with a translation that is wonderful, maybe even beautiful, but not actually faithful, which, as some scholars argue, isn't really a translation anymore. There's always a risk of over-interpreting, making the new version say more than the original intended. The sweet spot for him is where creativity and fidelity are in constant dialogue, not in conflict. So, pulling back, what does all this mean for you? You, whether you're working as a translator, reading translated novels, or trying to explain anime subtitles to your friends. I think the big takeaway is this. When you engage with translated texts, you're not interacting with some neutral mirror, but with a creative construction. Every translation is a decision, a product of negotiation between texts, cultures, even personalities. And if you're a translator, this paper offers maybe a little permission to own your agency. It's not betrayal unless you're distorting the meaning. Creativity, DEFO and NZIKOU says, isn't a flaw in translation, but the heartbeat of the whole project. It's about making meaning live again in a new language. Quick side note, this just popped into my head. Doesn't it seem like the best translations are the ones where you kind of forget their translations at all. I remember reading a Russian classic in English and only halfway through realizing, wait, this wasn't written in English. Totally off track there, but maybe that's another angle on this. Wrapping up. Remember, academic work like this isn't offering the answer. It's a call to reflection, to see translation less as a mechanical process and more as a creative, ethical, and even philosophical act. So next time you pick up a translated book or use Google Translate and laugh or cringe at the results, spare a thought for the dance between fidelity and creativity happening behind the curtain. That's it for today on In Depth with Academia. Thanks for joining me, Richard Price. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and always, always remember, research is a conversation, not a commandment. See you next time.